in general, in your life, when you are comparing two things, it's for a reason. You are saying something like, should I live in Shanghai? Should I live in London? You're trying to make a choice. There's some reason. There's some emergent idea from comparison. And that's how we will approach comparison in our writing class. We never just want to say an apple is red, an orange is orange. We want to think of the emergent idea, the reason that we are comparing things. And a great example is in Frederick Douglass's Autobiography. So Frederick Douglass was a slave in the United States in the 19th century. He escaped from slavery and he became a leader in the movement for abolition. He became a leader in the movement to stop all slavery. As part of his efforts, he wrote the story of his life. And in the story of his life, he recounts coming to the city from the country. And although this is one paragraph in his book, I have broken it up into several paragraphs so that we can see how the ideas are linked together. Nonetheless, I recommend the original book. It's great. Frederick Douglass comes to the city, and upon arriving at the city, he says, I noticed there's a difference between slaves in the city and slaves in the country. So now he is comparing two things. He's saying slaves in the city are generally better treated than slaves in the country. There's this kind of direction happening, right? Slaves in the city are generally not beaten or lashed. Violence is not inflicted upon the slave in the city as often as it is inflicted upon the slave in the country. Generally, slaves in the city are not harmed physically as much. Generally, slaves in the city are better fed, better cared for than slaves in the country. This is the third paragraph. And this is an ironic set where the third point twists the meaning. The main idea is that there is a difference, and the difference is generally in this direction. But there are exceptions. There are things that break the pattern, where the life of a slave in the city might even be worse than the life of a slave in the country. For example, these two young ladies who are slaves have this terrible problem that they have been mauled and maimed and harmed. Deeply, they are all cut up, even disfigured, because their mistress, their master's wife, the woman in charge of the house, is beating them savagely, so much that one of them has a terrible nickname. This story illustrates the point that in general, slaves in the city are better off, but there are still some who have terrible lives. And although Frederick Douglass does not write this next part literally, it is the entire book. It is the rest of his life. He is making an emergent point that yes, it's better to be a slave in the city generally than to be a slave in the country. But really, all slavery is bad. All people should be free and equal members of their society.